Welcome to the Reclaim Leader podcast. I'm Jason Tucker.
And I'm Jesse Skiffington.
We're two pastors in the trenches who are passionate about church health for greater gospel impact.
We share the ups and downs of ministry, strategies that worked for us,
and some that didn't.
Best practices and practical tools for church leadership.
The goal, to help all of our churches flourish. Let's get started.
See another sunrise, sing a little song.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Reclaim Leader podcast. Jesse, it is a beautiful yet frigid day here in the Northeast.
I bet.
We are still digging out of our storm we had last weekend. If you're listening in real time, you know the eastern part of the country got absolutely destroyed with snow, and now we're in these terrible cold temperatures. I'm so thankful to God that we have heat, that we're pretty much dug out, and the most annoying thing that happens is I can't feel my fingers. So I feel like that's a lot to give thanks for.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, we were watching some of that because, you know, we have family across the country and stuff. And my son, Will, was like, Dad, when did they start giving winter storms a name? And I was like, I don't know, but this one has one, so it must be pretty bad, right? So we were just watching. We have family all the way from like Texas, Oklahoma, all the way up to where you guys are. So yeah, what a crazy time, right?
And it looks like the episode we recorded before the championship game, the NFC Championship game, you were prophetic, calling the Seahawks victory. That was pretty exciting. I was happy for you.
Well,
I was very happy.
I appreciate that. A little rematch of when we should have run the ball instead of throwing the ball a while back for the Patriots and the Seahawks. But
who even remembers that?
I was reflecting on it. We got a lot going on in our world and a lot of complex things that we need to be thinking about and pray about and paying attention to. But there's also something just good about enjoying something good in your larger community. And so it was kind of fun to celebrate that with people and just have something to focus on beyond the problems that exist in our world. And so, yeah, it's always a good opportunity.
Amen to that. I mean, I was listening to the news today. You know, the news is always so happy, but they were just like, we're 45 seconds closer to doomsday on the doomsday clock or something like that. I'm like, oh my God.
Doesn't that just capture it all?
Like,
right?
I even need to hear that.
Well, I mean, the reality is we need to be attentive to the real world we live in and prayerful and purposeful in that. But also, whatever's good, whatever's excellent or praiseworthy, like spend some time enjoying some things together too. And in some ways, that's part of what makes life worthwhile. And actually had the chance to fly after that game, watched it, and just enjoyed it with the family. And new people are out there celebrating. And then flew across Washington State to Spokane, Washington, to visit the former senior pastor here at Marine View, who was
that's great.
Recently, it was a really fun visit, but it was kind of a hard visit. He was just recently diagnosed with brain cancer, and so he's navigating this really hard thing. But being able to talk about the Seahawks, even though it's nothing in the grand scheme of existence and it doesn't matter, it was just something I think good about being two guys talking football and having a couple laughs, even though he's facing this really big challenge. And I was there to pray with him and talk with him, but also just to be people together. And so kind of holding both of those things, I think we can do well as pastors and leaders in these challenging days. So anyway, didn't mean to go so deep. So right off the bat, here
we went hard. Sorry, all new listeners. It's not always
who are these guys. Yeah,
that heavy on the front end, but welcome everybody who's listening.
We're glad to have you listening in, and hopefully you've listened to the previous two parts of this little mini series that we're in, looking at Jason, some of the themes from your book, Jason, about speaking their language and how do we help tell the gospel story in the language of the people in our times, and especially as we're thinking about reaching younger, and how do we create that relational ministry to connect and to, in a certain sense, translate the gospel into the language of our times and to pass the baton of faith. And so really have enjoyed the first couple of conversations, and they've been oriented around kind of the 4 Ds of your process for leading change and bringing about some of those, practical things that we want to move toward as we think about what God is calling us to do, and how do we actually get traction on reaching out to the people God's calling us to reach. So I want to revisit just super briefly, because I know we've talked about these things, but we're going to be talking about decide today, which is kind of that vision then beginning to shape into strategy phase of the process. But before we get into that, discover. We started there a couple weeks ago talking about discover, and that's about discovering who you are as a congregation, as a community, strengths and weaknesses, the reality of who you are, all that, and who is God calling you to reach, or who are you trying to reach? So did I capture that right? That discover phase?
Yeah, that's perfect. Discover is really, in a lot of ways, this process isn't all that different than a lot of sort of processes that consultants and coaches they'll use in organizations, because it really has all the same steps if you're doing it right. That first step is that honest self-assessment, and it's the hardest thing for churches to do, and it's why they often don't continue in the process, because they just don't want to face the scale. They just don't want to see under the hood and see how bad they think things might be. But the problem is, it's not until you do that that you can actually address things. So discover is, who are we? Who are we trying to reach? Why aren't we reaching them? And it shows you what the gap is. And then the next phases are about closing that gap.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the more you get into the rhythm of this, the less sort of the hard self-awareness of the community has to come into play, because this is something you're doing on a regular basis now. And you're like, yeah, I know who we are and know who we aren't. And I know where the gaps are. And it's not this new kind of catastrophic discovery over and over again or something.
Yeah, that's right.
So anyway, so really good. And then phase 2 is the discern phase. And I really like this. This is actually a big chunk of the book is dedicated to this part of the process. And so just to remind us, discern, what are we doing? We got a team, a strategic vision team that's kind of working this part of the process. But what is this discern phase?
Yeah, then it's a matter of, once you figure out who we're trying to reach, it's all about getting to know them and what actually reaches them. Yeah. And part of it's, again, really the title of the book is this phase. How do we speak their language? We got to know their language. So for example, if I'm trying to reach teenagers, I need to understand how they view the world, what their hopes and dreams are, where their pain points are, all of those things as I get to know them.
Yeah.
And then sort of run that across what we do as a church and see how can we start thinking about connecting or bringing the gospel to bear in their life. And this was a big Tim Keller idea, the idea of developing a theological vision.
Right.
He said it's like hardware and software. Hardware, your computer software is what you're going to do. And in a church, it's like what you believe, what you're going to do. But there's an important layer in between in the programming world called middleware. This is all from his book, Center Church. And middleware is the translative thing that helps the hardware talk to the software. And he said, that's like your theological vision.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's often a relational connection that has to happen in order to really understand, right? It's not just learning all the weird words that Gen Z uses and then like working them into a sermon.
Right. I promise they will run.
Oh my gosh, I will run. I'll run away from myself. Like they would say that's cringy, Dad. That's what my kids tell me when I try to do that kind of thing. And so it's about getting to know them relationally. What makes them tick? What are their pain points? What are their things they're hopeful for or frustrated about? And being able to address those. And from also a knowledge about who you are. You're not trying to become them all of a sudden, right? But to understand them. So I love that discern phase. And you kind of had 4 kind of key areas, worship being one. How is our worship experience translating to other generations or to kind of multiple generations? Just understanding how it's either connecting or landing or not and working from there. And then you talk about next gen ministries and how we got to invest there. And that's like a really crucial step. And you and I always talk about, what does your budget say about how committed you are to passing the baton of faith to the next generations with your staff budget, your program budget, stuff like that. And then the last 2, we're not going to spend a ton of time here, but they were discipleship and evangelism. And when we're talking about discipleship as something that we want to figure out how to kind of translate or have a way of passing that on to upcoming generations, you and I often talk in terms of discipleship pathways. And maybe that's a new idea for people, or maybe people are like, yeah, we know that well. We've listened to your podcast enough, or whatever, or read other stuff. But briefly, discipleship pathways. Tell us about that. What is it that we need to be thinking about related to translating the gospel and discipleship pathways?
Yeah, at some point you have to figure out how to scale discipleship, even though discipleship really is one-on-one. It always has been, always will be. But you have to create opportunities for those relationships to happen and opportunities for people to take a step deeper into their faith. And so how do you do that? How do you scale what is relational? And And you do that by just having a strategy. And again, we talk about pathway. I first heard this from Tony Morgan years and years ago when we had him on the podcast. This idea of the difference between programs and pathways. Programs are sort of a collection of activities that may or may not be related to one another.
Mhm.
A pathway is clearing out all of that clutter
Yep.
and helping people to see what is their next step to take. So, for example, if you have, and we talk about this a lot, but at Christmas time, you have a big Christmas event. So I think, okay, what's the pathway to take somebody who's never been to anything at church, bring them to the event, and then what are the next steps we want to invite them to so that they become a regular part of our community?
Yeah.
And so when you think in terms of pathways, honestly, it's just an intentional way of thinking about
Mhm.
how are we going to bring people with us on this journey deeper toward Jesus Christ.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And that picture of apprenticeship, helping them follow in the way of Jesus and creating something of a framework that we would call next steps, or, that give them opportunities to explore from where they are to where God is calling them to be. And so I like that. I think it's a helpful for us to think about that in the context of, so what we needed maybe is not what everybody needs from the next generations coming up. Maybe they kind of operate differently. So what are we going to do to provide those opportunities for them?
And the whole point of these four
Yep.
is to just identify in these four major areas in the life of the church.
Yeah.
Can we identify the gap between what we're doing and who we're trying to reach? It's just sort of like, so you're kind of drilling down deeper on where the gaps are so you can start to address them.
I love that. I think that's good. And then the final one was evangelism, and how do we really move in the direction of this relational evangelism that we kind of intuitively know that that's the best way, and yet sometimes we struggle with that, and evangelism can kind of be a scary word. So sometimes evangelism itself, just even conversations around that and what it looks like for us to reach out and to be inviters, there's just a huge gap there because it's not something we are always proactive about addressing in our congregations. So any other kind of thoughts on evangelism, or kind of?
Yeah, with evangelism, I specifically mentioned it's not about handing out gospel tracts.
Mhm.
At least in my area of the country, that would be incredibly ineffective.
Yeah.
It's about evangelism is an invitation to relationship.
Yeah.
That's really what that is. It's about how do I make genuine relationships and friendships in such a way that it points people to Jesus. And I will, and if they are up for it, I will kind of take them by the hand and walk them there.
Yeah. And sometimes it's just teaching our people to have the courage to have spiritual conversations, but not in weird ways, like just talking about, hey, my kids were at this church event the other day, it was so cool, et cetera, and just bringing that into the conversation. And then if there's an opening, somebody says, oh yeah, where do you guys go to church? And you start talking about that, and then maybe there's an invitation. And I think something you guys do well at Tower Hill, and that we've sought to emulate over the years, is to create invitation opportunities, or like entry points that are not like, come here, the fire and brimstone series or whatever. It's like, no, come to this event or this activity, get to know some people, and then maybe on the back end of that is an invitation closer into the life of the church or something.
Yeah,
like
and it's creating a culture of invitation in your church. That's really what that's about.
That's right. I love it. Okay. So discern. It's all about trying to figure out who you're trying to reach and learning a lot more about them. And then what are the gaps in kind of these four key areas or other areas in your church where maybe that's not quite translating based on what you're discovering about who you're trying to reach. So the next phase is decide. And we're going to spend the rest of our time talking about decide what we will do related to the needs that we discerned. That's kind of how I captured that. Beginning to build a strategy, not to implementation yet, but just thinking in terms of what is it that we want to move toward in our strategy? What might we do? And then kind of bridge that gap to the people we're trying to reach. So let's talk a little bit about that. The now what? And you use a phrase in there that, or kind of an acronym, KRA. And I'm like, wow, that's just like, there's, we got this team, we got the KRA. So let's walk through this a little bit so that people get a picture. And I was just thinking maybe even walking through this process as this vision team, your strategic vision team, gets a sense of who you're trying to reach. You've discerned that. You have some areas where you've noticed some gaps. What do we do after that? Do we just skip to like, here's the 5 ideas we're going to try? what you're suggesting in this decide phase is bringing the congregation in to be a part of that process so there's buy-in. So I think
Yes.
this is essential. We can't miss this part. And so let's talk a little bit about that. What is a KRA, Jason, and what does that have to do with anything?
Yeah.
I love it.
Great question. So a KRA is just simply a key result area. What is an area that we're going to focus on to make successful gospel translation possible across generations?
Mm-hmm.
And in this phase, you're going to develop, the church is going to develop 3 to 5 of these that
Mm-hmm.
you want to tackle in the next 3 to 12, maybe even 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
The idea is, okay, we've talked a lot about the gaps. We've talked a lot about who we are, who we're trying to reach. Now, what are we going to do about it?
Yeah.
And all along the way, and this is really why it's so important when you're leading change in a church, probably leading a change in any organization, the process is probably more important than the vision. And that's because the process is going to get you where you want to go and build the buy-in that you're hoping for, and vision will come along the way organically. Even if you had a bunch of people that you would consider to be not visionaries and you got them in a room and you were talking about closing the gap,
Mm-hmm.
you would still get a lot of imagination. You would still get a lot of ideas. Those things would kind of bubble up. But this is so important. So Dr. John Cotter out of Harvard, he's the one that talks about you begin slowly. You start with a small amount of people
Mm-hmm.
to get some critical decisions and action done. But then when it's time to really decide what you're going to do, to bring in as many people from your organization as possible so that they feel like they have a voice on the ground floor, and so that they'll be motivated to be mobilized around a particular key result area. So
Yeah.
So this is where it's like you invite the whole congregation and you're going to share the work that your strategic vision team, 6 to 8 people, has come up with. You're going to share the data of like, okay, this is what we found, who we are, who we're trying to reach. These are the gaps that we've identified. And to have a meeting and be like, okay, congregation, does this resonate with you? What are some other ones that you think we missed?
Mm-hmm.
Get them involved in that. And then it's about, okay, now we're going to brainstorm and figure out what we're going to try to do to address these gaps, these key result areas.
Yeah, I love that. And you actually lay out a really specific kind of workshop that can kind of lead a church through that. And a couple of times you say, it's important for you not to be the one leading the whole thing. There are some crucial points for a pastor to step in as kind of a leading voice. And there's other times where you want to let your team lead or kind of leave space for lots of ideas and not shut it down too early. And we'll get into that a little specifically, but just a kind of a cautionary tale. We did this one time, very similar process. And we actually brought in an outside consultant to help us have this conversation. And it felt so hard for me as a leader to let go of some control. Now, this person talked to me beforehand, reassured me that of commitment to our vision and mission and direction. And he just said, just trust me, leave some room for everybody to contribute, because on the back end, we're going to get back to the things that are priorities for your leadership team, but you got to leave a lot of room for everybody to contribute. So there's buy-in by the end and everybody feels heard. And that was, I got to be honest, that was the hardest meeting I've ever sat through.
Yeah.
And somebody was pointing us in the rearview mirror over and over and over again in that meeting. Let's go back and bring back this and that and the other thing. And it was all I could do to not jump out of my chair and be like, we're never going back. And whatever. And I remember it was Corey McFarland, one of our elders. He could tell I was getting a little agitated as a younger leader. And he just put his hand on my knee and said, hey, just be patient. Just be patient. We're going to get there. And that's all I really needed. He was a seasoned leader that had led a lot of change in his own business and kind of knew what this process is like. So I want to walk through it if it's okay with you. I don't want to steal anything from the book, but I really like the way you laid it out. And I think it's reassuring maybe for a leader to go, oh, this is where we start and kind of how we work through it. And then the outcome is this really good place where I still get a lot of input and our leadership team gets a lot of input. So let's just walk through it. You said first thing, you do this KRA workshop, you invite the congregation to it, but you also make some targeted invites. Tell us about the targeted invites. What is important about specific invitation?
Yeah, you want to make sure that the people that you're inviting, as much as possible, represent different sort of stakeholders in the life of the church.
Hmm.
And that is so that you get buy-in from all the different factions, if you will, of just, I mean, this was naturally, they're just different tribes in your church. You want to try to bring stakeholders.
Mhm.
You also want to try to populate it with people that are, uh, reasonable in the sense that they're not just the stick in the mud, although I'd invite them too, by the way.
Mhm.
But you want to make sure that you get as many of those folks there as possible. And if you did the focus groups earlier in the process, I would invite all of those people. It's really a y'all come,
Mhm.
but you really want to make sure, if you can, to get those stakeholders in the room.
Yeah. And you talk about, I mean, that could be a big group depending on the size of your church. It could be a mid-sized group, but trying to get people around tables for the discussion aspects of this. So you've put the invite out, you've done it in a blanket way to the church, the whole congregation, but also targeting specific invites. And maybe it's a Saturday from like 10 to 2 or 9 to 2 or
Yeah.
whatever you're going to do. And now let's walk through what that time looks like. So the first step you say is to create a sense of urgency. And so it kind of takes us back to the beginning of the process in some ways.
Yes.
So tell us about what's important about not skipping ahead, but kind of revisiting where that strategic vision team has been.
Yeah, you want to try to bring the congregation up to speed on what's been discussed
Mhm.
already, because you don't want to feel like all these things have already been decided and I'm just here. Why am I even here?
Mhm.
It's also shortening the process, because it sort of kind of limits the scope of what you're talking about, because you've already done the slogging out of who we are, who we're trying to reach, all of that.
Mhm.
So there are just less questions you have to field in that area. And you still, your leadership are the ones who are setting the goals, setting the pace. And if you had the whole congregation doing that, it'd be really hard to get anywhere because there's too many people in the room. So now that you're at this point, when you open it up, developing a sense of urgency, helping them know what you've been working on. Like you all developed in earlier in the team, you developed your sense of urgency around, we got to change now. The opportunity cost of waiting to make change and lead change in our church is too high. Now's the time to take a swing. And this is why, and this is what the data says, and this is what's going on in our country and people's view of Jesus, so on and so forth. So you just bring the congregation up to speed so that they also feel that urgency. Urgency is so important in all of this. Change isn't going to happen unless there's a level of urgency, because status quo is just too strong.
Yeah. And so in a certain sense, you're saying this is why we're here, because this is an urgent thing that we want to work on. And it also sets a little bit of the frame where the focus is going to be, because you're saying this is the urgent thing, and this is some of the ways that we're suspecting we want to go begin to go about addressing it, or the areas, but we're not going to dictate those yet, right? Because you want to create buy-in. So then the strategic vision team gives a report.
Yes.
And they basically just check in. Is that just, here's what we've been learning, here's what we discovered?
This is what we found. I mean, it can be, I think in the book I have that it could be 60 minutes. It doesn't even have to be that long. The framework in the book is
It's a guideline.
Adjust it to whatever you need to do.
Yeah.
It could be done in 20 minutes, but the idea is, and make sure it's not the pastor, somebody from the vision team gets up and just shares.
Yeah.
It's a vacation pictures, it's just like this sums up what we've been working on and where we landed.
Yeah.
And what it does is it shows the congregation that there was some thought that got us here. There was a process that got us here.
Yeah.
You guys already thought about all this stuff. Wow, you really looked at the numbers, right?
Yeah.
It creates it validates the work.
Yeah, a little bit of credibility, a little bit of background information. And so you're presenting some of the who we are and who we're trying to reach, plus some of the discern phase, right? Here's some gaps that we noticed as we were discerning. And here's some things that maybe we feel are areas to work on, and kind of casting that framework. And so the SVT report happens. And then you said there's a group assessment time, this is my favorite time. This is like brainstorm time, right? SWOT analysis.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah. So when we're talking about a SWOT analysis, you and I, hopefully maybe leaders out there, you use these all the time, but you kind of focus on just the top two. You talk about strengths and challenges instead of weaknesses. So, that's a little bit of a
Cheers people don't like when
less
they hear
negative way
weakness,
to
okay.
talk about it. So strengths and challenges, I appreciate that softness, Jason. Thank you for that. But what are we after in that phase? And this is where we're handing things over to the groups to begin to think and dream together around their tables. Is that kind of what that looks like?
That's exactly right. So you get them around tables and you ask them those questions and you start asking, what are the things that we could try to change this based on this information, based on our conversation? What are some things? And it's really just a brainstorming session where people are coming with ideas. Not all ideas are equal. They're going to get some clunkers.
I love some of your examples in the book. We should start a circus because kids love circuses, right? Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it revealed a certain way that I feel about clown ministry, but I have heard that it's successful in places. I've never experienced that, but it's really getting your congregation to get into a big brainstorm session. And then here's the beautiful Holy Spirit thing that happens is that, give them a break after that. They've gone for maybe an hour, give them a break, come back. And then you just do, you guys are all familiar with this. You just get someone from each group to report what they talked about.
Yep.
And you write it on I do it old school and I just put it on those big Post-it pads.
Yeah.
And then as each group goes, the cool thing that happens is you start to see overlap with the ideas and you just circle those. Where's the overlap?
A theme emerging here. And
exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly right. And
go ahead.
No, but that's what's so powerful is people look around, they're like, oh my gosh. Yeah. They thought that too.
Yep.
And what happens is you start to the ideas just start to kind of naturally coalesce. And then you as the leader just sort of look, well, it looks like we have about 3 big areas if I were going to consolidate these things. Or hey, it looks like we have 5, or maybe we have 7 and we need, let's see, I think this one can combine with this one. And it's identifying these seem to be the key result areas that we're looking at. And that doesn't mean you're at the strategy level. This is where pastors are nervous about losing control.
That's right. Yeah, exactly right. That's it.
Right?
Yeah.
Because you can relabel these areas as you see fit if you stick with the theme. Yeah. You can refine it back in your leadership team. This is really just about they're just going for ideas. They're getting excited. And you're deciding to work on so that when your plan comes together later and you say, these are our 3 things, they'll be like, the 3 things. Great.
That's right. Yeah. And you talk about, so you kind of do that assessment phase. It's a lot of brainstorming. And then you get those kind of key areas and you maybe position them around the room and say, whichever one you feel most strongly about or passionately about, go that direction. And then you take those people who have an affinity around that or a passion for it, and they begin to think about specific ideas related to what we might do in that area. And then on the back end of that, you bring everybody back again and share and discuss. And that's the part, I think this is where the caveat comes in, which I appreciated that you included, is that we don't do whatever just showed up on the page. We do what the leaders decide based on what the groups suggest.
Yes.
So the leadership is never abdicating its authority to be the final decision makers here. We're just bringing a lot of people in for the process. And then we can, like a good leader does, we take people's ideas and we help give them shape in a way that resonates with the overall vision and direction that we're moving in. And so it's kind of a collaborative process. So you're not relinquishing full control. Just as I wasn't in that brainstorming meeting I had a long time ago, I thought this is the end. We're going back to 1972 and I quit. But no, we ended up in this really healthy, forward-looking place. But we had to bring in ideas from across the whole gamut in order to kind of get that buy-in and also get some clarity about where we're going to go next.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And this whole event can be done in a day. And I would suggest or maybe like a Friday night and then a Saturday morning. Yeah. But I would not stretch this out over multiple weeks. Yeah. I think you want to get everyone in the room once if you can and show them it. Because here's the thing, Jesse. I know it's not in your church because, but the pace of thinking through these things and deciding in church world is far too long unnecessarily.
Yeah. Yeah.
What we can show is we can arrive at some decisions or some areas in a pretty short amount of time if we're all thinking on it together and in a really orchestrated way.
Yeah.
And then, the next one we'll talk about next week is, okay, let's put the plan together and let's actually do it. And let's figure that out.
And that's a big gap that we'll also address. And
Yeah.
I'm glad that you spend a couple of chapters really dedicated to implementation, because I think there's probably a lot of leaders that are like, yeah, I've done all these things in some form or fashion, but we don't seem to get traction on any actually lasting change or any lasting whatever ideas related to what we did. And so, I'm thinking about some of our stuff here. How long does it take to have a meeting like this? Well, if you've done that front end work really well with a smaller team and you have clarity about how you want to share that work with those that gather, you can actually do this in a 3 to 4 hour window, maybe a little more. We did one in the fall here at Marine View, and we did it from 9 to noon. It ended up being 9 to 12:30, and it wasn't quite enough time. And I was like, okay, next time we're going to have lunch and then come back and refine some of our thinking. So you can kind of play with it and adjust as needed. But I would encourage you to, if you haven't done something like this in a while, just getting people together to dream and think and pray and discern and have fun and brainstorm, like that is a awesome thing to have happen just on its own.
Yeah.
And then if some good things come out of that, you've kind of built some culture that maybe will be helpful down the road. So anything else on this decide phase that?
Yeah. You can't shortchange the process. To your point, if you don't do those first steps, if you just try to jump to this, you're not going to get the results you're looking for. It's going to be a lot harder to move forward and to make those changes
Yeah. Or you might get some really too broad of conclusions or something where it's like, we want to do, and then it's like, it's not clear enough or something because it doesn't have that time to marinate on the front end. So I love it. And then you just that last helpful thing. This is something you and I say as strategy starting to come along. There's no such thing as a bad idea. Well, there's bad ideas. There's no such thing as an off limits idea.
Oh, there you go.
Probably there are off limits ideas too, but the idea is we want lots of ideas at this phase. And when people are objecting too early, we could never do that, or we could never afford that, or we're like, no, let's think in more in terms of, but what if we could, or what if we were the kind of church that did, what might it look like? So this is where we really want to be open to some ideas that we maybe could then think about what would it mean to deploy those or implement those.
Yeah.
So I love it. So we're going to get to that next time. And can't wait to talk about getting it to the ground floor. A lot of us as leaders like 50,000 feet, and we're just fine at cruising altitude. But getting things to the ground floor and actually seeing them come to life, that's where I think one of the largest gaps is. So looking forward to diving into that next time around. And Jason, thanks for helping us walk through a process like this that can lead change in a good way that helps us to reach out to the folks around us that God's calling us to reach.
Well, you're welcome. And, the reason why I feel so passionate about this is the process that we've used for the last 13 years and we continue to use over and over again, and it works.
Yeah.
And, when I see churches that are stuck, I just want to say, like, it doesn't have to be this way. You can move forward. You really can. And it actually isn't that hard. It's just, you got to just follow the steps. And, I was just thinking today is the day that the book actually releases, the day that this
awesome.
Goes on. Yeah. So you can, if anybody's interested, you can, well, of course you're interested. Now,
you wouldn't be, Jason.
You can download a free chapter. So if you go to reclaimleader.com/speaking their language, you can sign up and get a free chapter, get chapter 1 and just see if you like it before you try to buy it. And hopefully you do. Hopefully you like it. And
yeah, it's good stuff.
And another thing is, obviously I'm a full-time pastor, so I don't have a ton of time, but a church is inviting me in to do their KRA workshop. And that's an area where a lot of pastors feel like it's like, I could do the other stuff, but I feel like running that workshop, I want to be part of it and don't want to have to lead it. Yeah. So that's something that I think that's wise if you could do that, because there's something about
being the facilitator that can, I don't know, for some people kind of give them this sense that you're skewing the results in your favor or whatever that is, right? So having someone come and facilitate that time can be really good, especially if it's someone you trust and know is kind of got your back on what you're trying to do in the big picture. So good stuff, Jason. And we'll get to the conclusion of Jason's book next time and think about that implementation phase. But in the meantime, any final parting words before we sign off?
That's it. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. I mean, it's this is such a blessing getting to do this and getting to talk about such an important subject. I mean, my goodness, if there was ever an hour for needing healthy churches, it feels like it's right now. And all that we can do to help each other, I think, is glorifying God and helping to grow His kingdom. I mean, it's it's overwhelming, everything that's going on in the world. So what can we do? We could double down on our decision to be faithful and fruitful congregations. So we can encourage each other on the way.
I love it. Again, the book is Speaking Their Language. Here's my copy. I've got lots of underlines already, Jason. So good.
Nice.
It's the subtitles, Leading Your Church to Reach Younger Generations. That's kind of the focus of a lot of churches, is reaching younger. But you could apply this in all kinds of different ways to the folks that God is calling you to reach. And next time we'll bring it to a close. But in the meantime, as we always say,
ministry is hard. It is so much better when we do it together. Take care, everyone.